Welcome back to the Gut Girls podcast. I am Diana.
And I'm Angela, and together we're the Gut Girls.
So, today we're going to be diving into a topic that so many of you listeners have been asking about, and that is food sensitivities. And so, it's possible if you're listening and you know the word food sensitivities, you've likely looked up gluten, you've likely thought about eliminating dairy, you maybe have done an elimination diet. But you maybe have done all of this and you still don't feel great.
Absolutely. Here's my thought on this in the Gut Girls theory. Food sensitivities are not the root problem, you guys. And I think that's where we kind of end. So they're clues. And Diana, we're going to go into a lot of detail about this. They're definitely clues, but they're not the only part of the picture. And so this is where a lot of people will say, I've eliminated gluten for a month and I didn't feel any difference. And I believe you. And I think that's because you just didn't take a deep enough dive. Instead, you just reduced the inflammation temporarily. But you didn't actually get to the root of it and heal the gut and kind of like reset the gut, which is what we're going to dive into. And so in today's episode, we're going to show you why sensitivities happen, why cutting foods isn't the full answer, and how we approach healing differently inside the Gut Girls.
Yeah, and so just like Angela mentioned, the food sensitivities are actually a signal. So if you find yourself with all these kind of weird symptoms, it can show up in so many different ways. For me, Angela, I think we have a picture of what my face rashes looked like, and Angela's going to pull that up for us. So if you're driving down the road, don't look at it. But if you're watching us, you can see this face rash was, it was intense. It was itchy. And I had already started trying to eliminate, foods, but I would eat onions and my face would break out into this weird, awful, itchy rash. And for some people, it shows up where they're running to the bathroom. For some people, it shows up in joint pain. For some people, it shows up in headaches. And sometimes it's hard to figure it out because it doesn't always happen immediately. Now, I did get a very clear, immediate response with this rash, but sometimes people don't get those responses for a few days. And so that's when you're like, okay, something deeper is going on. Maybe just this food sensitivity test that I bought online is not the whole answer, right, Angela?
Yeah, and I'm kind of keeping this picture up here just to kind of play off a previous episode where, Diana, if I look at this, and I think a lot of people look at this, they'd probably think like, oh, that's hormonal, right? And if you didn't listen to the previous episode about how hormone disruption actually begins in the gut, this is just going to play off of that, where maybe it was a little bit hormonal for you, but really you didn't see the difference until we reset the gut and took out some of those food sensitivities, but even went beyond that and healed the gut, right? So let's
Yeah,
talk
so
about. Oh, go ahead.
Oh yeah, no. So I basically was just gonna say, so this can kind of show up in when people talk about leaky gut. In some of our previous episodes, we had talked about leaky gut and what exactly that meant. And I had already kind of researched that, right? Back in 2016, 2017, when I was having some of those symptoms, I was like, what is this whole leaky gut? So tell us a little bit, like get a little bit more sciencey about what was going on with me.
Yeah, well, and I'll even keep it kind of in simple terms where, one of the reasons we see a reaction like yours is what you said. It is leaky gut. But guys, what that is you have a gut lining that is supposed to be strong. If you're looking, you'll see like I'm literally interlacing my fingers. And what that does is if there's no holes in here, then, food and digestion take place. But when the gut kind of gets a little bit leaky or disrupted, you start to see these like little holes where my fingers are. And so now food particles that we're eating, they actually get through the gut lining and they can actually get into the bloodstream. And then that's where you can get more of like an immune response to that food. And so, of course, with an immune response comes a lot of inflammation, right? And so you feel the achy joints, you see the skin inflamed, you see the rashes. And then on the other side of that, if it continues for a while, you can start to see digestive juices become lower. And so then you're really not even digesting your food, and you're constantly getting this influx of particles into the bloodstream. And then the immune system is constantly on alert. And so that's where people will come to us and they're like, I can't eat a thing without having some kind of response to food.
Yeah, we've had people that have said, like, I can only eat 5 foods or 10 foods, and this is what's really going on. So they have, if people have, only been able to eat 5 or 10 foods, they're doing food sensitivity tests, they're doing all the things, but maybe they're not getting to the root of why they can only eat those 5 or 10 things. And so, one of the things that you sometimes make this metaphor is like having a leaky roof. And it's basically just what you were explaining when you were interlocking your fingers there. If you have a leaky roof, the water continues to kind of drip in. You can put these buckets underneath, you can remove those foods, right? But until you fix the roof itself, it's going to keep happening. The leaks are going to keep happening. You're going to see it happen in different rooms of, in different parts of the GI tract. So you're going to start seeing that happen over and over and over again. So what I really want to do, because so many people are like, all right, what next? I get it. All right. Food sensitivities, maybe that's not the full answer. And so that's when we're like, let's dive a little bit deeper and look and see what the GI map test looks like. And so, Angela, I think you're going to pull up here a couple of examples where you can show us how this looks, how these food sensitivities, why these food sensitivities are kind of showing up and what that looks like on the stool test. So take us a little deeper there.
Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And this is where I don't know, I go a little nerdy, but at the same time, like everything inside of me is jumping up with excitement because I just think this is fascinating when we get those people. And so I have a picture of the stool test right here. And you guys are, most of you that worked with us may be familiar with some of these markers, but for someone who's new to the podcast, you guys aren't familiar. So I pulled up just to give you an idea here. This is on the GI map, your immune response markers. So Diana, just to confirm, you can see my screen, correct?
Yes, we're good.
Okay, so you have these immune response markers, and this one here, anti-gliadin IgA, is essentially your immune system's response to gluten. So this is that scenario we just talked about where your immune system is now responding. You can see on this person, it's above 500. That is so high. And you actually see this marker right above it, secretory IgA, that's the immune system. So you've got the immune system. You can see this, guys, it's through the roof. And right below it, you've got anti-gliadin IgA. So this person is clearly reacting to gluten. We see that on the GI map, right? But then what I'm going to show you guys is this person could just, let's kind of go here for a second. This person could just eliminate gluten. But if you don't know the root, this person is going to bring gluten back in, and then they're going to just respond to gluten all over again, and they're going to get nowhere because if I share my screen, a different screen now, this person's GI map showed in the commensal. So again, the commensal are your good bacteria. And if you guys go back to an episode of ours previously where we went through the entire GI map test, the phyla here represents 90% of someone's good bacteria. So this person is 90% what we'd call insufficient. And so now remember, guys, the good bacteria is what makes up the immune system, right? And so if this person's immune system is faulty and responding to such high levels of gluten, it's not just take out the gluten and this person is better. It's like, no, we got to build up the good bacteria. We actually got to get let's say like the army back on for performance. Like we've got to bring all of those guys back on so that we can have actually a proper response to gluten. So it's not just eliminating, it's rebuilding here. And until you do that, you're not going to get full resolution. You begin with eliminating gluten to take out the inflammation to reduce the immune system's response. But then behind the scenes, you're rebuilding with food, lifestyle changes, potentially targeted supplementation, and then you kind of reboot the system, and you get a different response. Now, I'm also going to share a food sensitivity test, which I think these are a lot of fun. So you guys should be able to see this food sensitivity test here. And this is one that we also run. And again, if you're driving, you might want to save this podcast and look back later. But if you guys are watching, if you've never seen a food sensitivity before, here's like the overall, let's say, category: cereals and seeds. And so you see a lot of things listed here, but if you look at a lot of these reds, you see wheat is all three, meaning high. So 3 reds obviously is very high. A green would mean it's fine, there's no problem. It's like a stoplight. And then yellow being at 2 is like, hey, caution, this guy is trending upwards, but not, super high. But on this person, we have wheat bran, we've got the wheat gliadin, like the triagliadin, we've got gluten wheat, we've got Drummond wheat, einkorn wheat, polished wheat. Like we've got all of these just through the roof. And if this was you could take this test probably anywhere, and you would say like, okay, I clearly need to eliminate gluten. But what I want to share with you is, until we did this person's GI map, that wasn't enough for them. So now I'm going to share another tab, and this is that same person's GI map. And on this is an overgrowth, Pseudomonas here. So Pseudomonas in research, this blows my mind, but it's so awesome. Pseudomonas in research is known to cause oral intolerance, or another word would be a food sensitivity, heightened towards gluten. Now, dairy also is in that category, but gluten is a big one. So that person that did this food sensitivity test and had a high response to gluten across the board is not a celiac patient. This person does not have celiac disease. They're just sensitive or responding to gluten because of this specific overgrowth of bacteria. So then if you can change the lifestyle, change the food consumption, change, just overall habits, then, and probably some targeted supplementation on this person, you can bring the Pseudomonas down, and then there's less of an oral intolerance or food sensitivity to gluten. You guys, isn't that fascinating? And then I want to show you one other one. Let me go to this tab here. So this is a patient, a client that I recently saw that has H. pylori. And you guys can see this on here. High H. pylori. I mean, the test shows it with even a positive virulence factor. And so clearly what we know, if you guys have listened to us on the podcast before, is H. pylori eats at a lot of nutrients, and we need nutrients to heal. So let's even say this scenario, Diana. If someone is responding to gluten sensitivity, but they have a really high level of H. pylori, even if they remove the gluten, if H. pylori is still there and never addressed, they're not going to absorb all the nutrients that are required to heal the gut lining. So isn't that crazy to think? Like, I could do all the work, but still not absorb these nutrients because of something like this being high. And this person, if I do share their, give me 1 second, right here it is. If I share their their immune response on the GI map, look at this. Secretory IgA was low, so their immune response was actually not firing as high as the other person you saw. And this is actually really like nitty gritty, but hang up tight with me, guys. H. pylori can lower your fat soluble vitamins like vitamin D. It can eat at those, and we need vitamin D to build an immune system. So that makes sense here if you're following along with me, that the secretory IgA would be low. This person's immune system is low, but they're still responding so heavily. Look at this one underneath it, to the anti-gliadin IgA, which tells you clearly they have a leaky gut going on, right? And so it's amazing look how specific we can be even with this GI map, seeing that, okay, all of these people, let's like pull back now. all of these people need to reduce or fully probably eliminate for a short period of time the gluten from their diet so that they're not triggering the pattern here. But all of them need to be served differently. One needs to build up his or her good flora. The other one needs to work on targeting that H. pylori. This one here needs to work on targeting their immune system. The other one needs to target the Pseudomonas. You can't get that from a food sensitivity test, can you, Diana?
It's so fascinating. I mean, every time I hear you talk about this test and we look at these markers and stuff, we're just kind of blown away. And it definitely paints a picture of what symptoms they might be experiencing before we actually even talk to them. Sometimes, we can look at that. And so it's so fascinating. And if that's you and you're super frustrated because you've bought those food sensitivity tests online, got your results back, tried to eliminate food. I mean, we've heard this story over and over and over again. And then you get so frustrated because it didn't work and you're still experiencing that major bloating or that face rash or whatever it is. And so that's what we try to help you with as in our coaching programs. Our goal is to help you, reduce this inflammation, give you the tools that you need with nutrition, like you said, some targeted supplementation, and just lifestyle changes, overall how to reduce stress a little bit, and then, heal the gut lining, restore those digestive juices, all of those things that you were talking about in those stool tests that we're seeing on those markers, the real root cause of why we're seeing our clients are seeing these food sensitivities, why I was seeing them when I was eating onions, right? I had this I was like itching all night long every time I would eat any onions. And so it finally pulled the whole picture together. And that's what I tell people a lot of times is, I'm like, maybe you're just missing sort of this last piece of the puzzle. You're kind of doing all the things. You're getting some movement in, you're sleeping well, you've done all of the right things. You're supporting your body, but maybe you're kind of missing this last piece of the puzzle in this GI map test. And so we have kind of created this framework based on my story, but then hundreds and hundreds of others so that we can kind of coach you through what to do next. And so that's what our goal is on the next episode, is to kind of give you some real tangible things. So you might want to bring a paper and pen to the next episode, because we're going to try to give you some tools that you can actually use at this point, and take you a little bit deeper into that. So Angela, we are going to cut off this episode for now, and we will see you guys on the next one when we talk even deeper about the food sensitivities.
Yes, so come prepared, and we can't wait to pick up where we left off.
The Gut Girls podcast is for educational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. We are not acting as licensed medical professionals. Always consult your doctor before making any changes to your health routine.